Welcome to the second episode of the Necessity Talk Show. Today we have our guests Bella and Ben. They're here to talk about thrifting and how you can use stuff that you find at your local thrift shop and you might be able to turn it into a profitable business or side hustle. So without any further introduction, I'll let you guys introduce yourselves and talk about what you guys do a little bit.
My name's Isabella Pabon. I sell vintage lingerie, intimates, women's clothing, and pre-loved apparel.
Ben Elkinoff, Thrifting Dome, and I sell mostly panties, but I collect a bit of everything. So just stuff I find and I'm able to sell to somebody else. That's mainly what it is.
Cool. What got you into thrifting, and how did you realize that you could use the stuff that you find, and instead of just wearing it, you could actually end up reselling it to other people?
Well, growing up, it was more of a necessity. It was like hand-me-downs from family. And then it turned into a love for it more than anything. I had a friend kind of mention that to me, and it stuck with me. And so then I started exploring, going to the thrift stores near me, Goodwill. And yeah, it was fun. It just became like a passion, and looking at the tags and figuring out the dates of stuff, and yeah, the history of everything was really interesting to me. So that's kind of how it started.
Yeah, so a mutual friend of ours, Kenneth Askazubi, took me to my first thrift store, 2017, and I clowned him for it. And then I turned to love it, and it just provided a way for me to not only express myself with the clothing that I bought, but I was able to then provide others with something that they loved and they were able to express themselves with. And I think that the historical aspect of the piece, where it came from, who owned it, how old it is, things like that always gave me just like the magic of finding something, and then being able to sell it was also great because it provided me with the means to continue to do it and to also meet a lot of great people and expand my network. So
Cool. Explain to me the artistry of when you go thrifting. How do you know that something is a good find? How do you know that this is a good piece and this is gonna make me such X amount of money or something like that?
So I guess for me, when I'm able to find something, I like to look at the tags. I like to look at the zippers. If I'm able to date it, even the better. I think what it really comes down to is if it's got its own significance to it, the price will carry. I'm a firm believer that price is not necessarily the overarching theme in what I find. I like to find things that speak to me. And if I'm then able to sell it to somebody else and they enjoy it, then that's what I'll do. But it never dawned on me that it's like, oh man, this is worth something. It was worth something to me, and therefore it carried some value to it. But just knowing, ways of stitching, different brands, whether it be vintage or even true vintage, it's every piece and the person that it came from before or wherever it was made before. That also carries a lot of its value. So it's a multitude of things, but definitely just something you can look at and say to yourself, man, I would love to either A, wear that, or B, see somebody else in it. And they would be able to love it too as much as I did when I found it. So
yeah. For me, it's really exciting finding something that I know has resale value. But yeah, more than anything, it's how the piece looks. I always love to try stuff on, even if I'm selling it. If I feel passionate about it, it catches my eye, I'm grabbing it and putting it in my store most of the time. So yeah, it's never really, if I know something's profitable, I might get it. But yeah, that's not the number one thing for me either. It's more just okay. And it curates nicely that way, I think. And that's how I love to do it. But
so your stores live online, right? Okay, cool. And is it just because I know Ben, just because I'm familiar with you, but the people watching might not be familiar. You just have an Instagram page, and so people hit you up just DMs, or do you reach out to people?
Yeah, so I guess for me, and it might be different from Bella, but what started out for me was, it was like I bought stuff and I collected it. It was like, but then people would notice what I was wearing and they would ask, "Oh man, where'd you get that?" Gatekeep in a sense, and say, well, I found it at this place, and they'd be like, "Man, like if you could find something like that for me, I would love to buy it off you." And then it became, "Oh wow, can I parlay this into something that will benefit me, not only for my time, but also for the income and the money aspect?" And so it fueled my drive to find stuff and sell stuff. Primarily, yes, it is Instagram, but a lot of it is indeed networking. Having word of mouth was huge for me. Being able to talk to people and say, if you like it, make sure to tell people where it's from. If you could tag me in a photo, that'd be great too. The best way to catch somebody's attention when you're trying to sell something is to let them see themselves in it. So a lot of what I did was, like, if it was in person with somebody, Instagram is tough to be able to translate that. But when I would do events or I would do pop-ups, that was another way that I would also get out there and sell stuff. But being able to put it on somebody, seeing how confident they look, it's like they're going to take that and run with it, tell people about it. And it's cyclical. Everything just sort of matches, and it grows.
Mm-hmm.
So.
And how about you? Where does your shop live?
So it's mainly online. I just opened a small little rack at Ellister's Elixirs in the city. It's a wellness boutique, but has a little studio space in the back, and she's selling some other vintage stuff and clothing. So I've been kind of between flea markets, that, and online, but whenever I have the opportunity to take nice photos of my products, I usually model them. I post them up on my page and promote it. But I've been doing mainly in-person stuff.
Okay.
So yeah, in the DMs, people DM me on my main page if they know my main Instagram, if they know they're interested in something. If the people are local, same with Ben. I really like to let people try things on, come over to my house. I have like kind of like a little, it's not a studio, but I have an open rack in my room, and I like to have my vintage stuff on there. So
word.
Yeah, it's fun.
So earlier you mentioned something about vintage and true vintage. What's the difference between vintage and true vintage?
So like vintage per se is something that can be like, I think the golden rule is 20 years or older.
Mm-hmm.
So like if I were to describe something as vintage, I'd be like, yeah, it's from the 90s. True vintage is more like pre-70s, 70s, and then pre-70s. So like, anything from the 10s, 20s, 30s, until you get to the 70s.
And I would imagine that the older the piece, the more it's worth, or is it?
Yeah, I mean,
Depends.
it does depend. A lot of what it depends on is manufacturing at that point, like where it came from. So like if it's like an older garment, let's say it's like, vintage Carhartt, but like 50s Carhartt, you have like 50s Woolrich, stuff like that is worth more than like a 90s Woolrich or a 90s Carhartt, whether it be a jacket or pants. Now there's some band tees from the 90s that are worth more than true vintage. But then you have military stuff, from world wars that are worth tons of money that would just beat out any sort of, vintage from the 90s. So it really does depend on A, the market, and B, the supply and demand for it. So a lot of it is like, when you get towards the true vintage side of it, it's like premium clientele. They have like a solidified interest in what they're buying, and they only sort of buy that sort of garment or item. When you get more towards the vintage side of it, it's like you have your collectors and stuff, but there's a wider array of people that are willing to pay for it, and it's more of a fluctuated cost than a fixed price. So it really does depend, as Bella said, but there's certain extraneous factors that have their price worths and do range quite greatly. So
what would you say is like the most difficult aspect of like thrifting and then reselling in the process of it?
Difficulty with just selling, or like maybe the culture around the selling. I'd say one of the more difficult things is Probably like the saturation of the amount of people that do what we do. I think that it's becoming a lot more common for people to get into thrifting and trying to buy things to then sell. And so, in order to beat out that competition, you have to immerse yourself in more knowledge about goods than that person does. So, it's good. Competition's great, but you need to be one step ahead of your competitor in order to benefit. And I think that some of the things that are some downsides of this thrifting selling are that people tend to it tends to be a toxic community at times. I think that there's great people, and Bella can attest to the people that she's able to have her boots in the stores, and everybody supports her. But there are people that tend to be a little too far right or left, and it's just, you need a balance with everything, but tending to not let other people interfere with what you can do in any business will serve you well. So just keeping a straight head and staying on that path is important. So yeah, I'd say the overarching themes of the difficulties are competition, and then the toxicity of the environment. So
I would say for me, definitely having it as a part-time gig. It's just keeping up with all of the clients messaging you, asking for measurements, having to take photos. I love to take extra photos for people if there's any flaws or tears, which tends to happen with antique and vintage pieces, stains sometimes. So you have to be very detailed about it, especially people that really care about, how the pieces look. And if they're paying good money for it, you want to make sure that they know what they're getting. So I'd say that's definitely difficult to keep up with at times when you have, I do story sales sometimes more than main feed posts. So I'll have set prices and include a few measurements and have it on my story for a day. And then whatever doesn't sell, I add it to an available highlight on my page. But so when I post those things, I have a lot of messages coming in, and that's always been difficult for me to manage, not, having another job and just having a life in general. But I enjoy it. It's nice to be able to talk to people, communicate with people, and send things out to like places everywhere worldwide. It's really cool.
To add on to what Bella said, because she's absolutely right. It's tough because the interface on apps and social media don't provide the buyer and the seller with like a unified agreement, and I think that there's a gray area in like how people how comfortable they feel, or if it's like maybe they didn't get charged the right price. There's a lot of extremities in figuring out basically like how smoothly the transaction will go, because there's times where the garment itself doesn't fit correctly, because some things are custom made, some things are found with holes and defects and rips, and it's like you are buying it, and we as sellers are trying to disclose as much information as we can on the quality and condition of the item. However, things can, as I said, become a little gray, and that sometimes consumers might feel a bit shorted, and that creates a difficulty, because it's like you want to try your hardest and provide quality goods for your buyers, but it's tough because you're buying a piece that's in a condition that you had no control over.
Yeah.
And so some people don't understand that, and but you also have the buyers who do understand that and are looking for pieces that are quite different in their conditions. So it really boils down to a good balance between everybody, and obviously you have good factors and you have bad factors. So
how long did it take you guys to like learn the history about like certain brands and learn which brands would be more successful than others?
I wasn't necessarily looking at brands when I first started. I did more pre-loved pieces, and by that I mean like modern pieces that maybe had a vintage look or just went with the vibe of my shop. But I would say over time, the more I did hunting and searching online and in person, I started to pick up on you know, what other people were selling as well. And I definitely became more fascinated with the dates of things and like the tags and the way they looked and felt. So yeah, I mean, I definitely think I'm still learning as I sell things. I learned so much from Ben. He has a great collection and a great shop. And
Oh, these are from her. So
yeah, they were from me. So yeah, it's taken time, and like I'm still learning and picking things up. I love watching YouTube videos of other people sourcing things and talking about vintage and antique stuff. It's fascinating. So yeah, it's taken all this time, and I still will continue to learn about it.
yeah, so thank you for that. It did start off with brands, um, Polo, Nautica, Tommy Hilfiger. Ken and I were obsessed with the culture around that stuff back in about 2016, 2017, and that's all we would look for. So that's the thing, is I don't even know what I missed back in the day of because I was just centrally focused on brands, and as I sort of started to broaden my horizon, I can attribute my findings and my knowledge to a couple things. I'd say the people that I thrifted with and got to know, they had great knowledge. I met people who had been thrifting since they were my age and they're in their 50s. I'd met people who had started thrifting 10 years ago, and I'd met people who started thrifting after me, but had instilled a regimented schedule that they were able to just find stuff, learn about it, and that's all they did. They eat and breathe thrifting. For us, it's a side hustle. So becoming, really knowledgeable in some areas is tough because you have other interests and you have other hobbies. You might have school, but it was nice to be able to meet so many different people that helped me to broaden the horizon. As I said, YouTube videos were great too, as Bella said. And just, honestly, like going up to people in the street and being like, oh man, like, where'd you find that? Or what's the jacket, because I would like to believe that people who do what we do have an eye for it. Mm-hmm. And so once we're able to catch something, that also attributes to knowledge building because you just get to learn more about everything and immersing yourself in a whole different world of clothing and fashion as a whole. So
yeah, that's dope. What would you say is like something that you've learned from thrifting that has been able to benefit you in other aspects of like not even just thrifting but just like in general, like in life?
I would love to speak to this. Just the community of it. Doing in-person flea markets has been like huge passion of mine since the first booth that I did with Redo Vintage. We did a little pop-up at Sickman's Mill. That was my very first booth, and it was really fun to be able to meet customers face to face, have them put a face to the name of my business and take a card, and then having them DM me after, send me photos of their pieces. That community is so special to me. I love it. I love being able to make friends with my customers. I think that's been like such a great, it's like a lesson in a sense to me of like the more you put yourself out there and expand, do in-person things, I think like you can never go wrong with that. So I feel like, yeah, that's probably something that has been a good lesson for me.
So I know that you probably agree with me, Amir, that money's been, prevalent in my life and I've always had a good handle of it. So learning about how to like sell and buy goods and like make a profit for it was good because, negotiation, persuasion, mutual agreement. I mean, it's things that will fare for me later in life. So I'm thankful for that, but I'd say the biggest thing became sort of what Bella had said with meeting people. And I think that my viewpoint of just like people and life in general, it was sort of like closed-minded in the way that I only knew like people that I went to school with. or I knew people outside of school that I played sports with, stuff like that. But doing thrifting and selling to people gave me so many different viewpoints on many different cultures, many different races, many different, income levels. It's, I got to meet people who had nothing, and I got to meet people who had everything. And it gave me just a wide breadth of understanding and just appreciation for where everybody comes from and what they do, how they think. And it just gave me such an amazing wealth of knowledge with just the way that people work. And I also think that will help me later in life. So
back to something that you had said earlier. You said that you started going to like pop-up shops in boutiques and stuff. Mm-hmm. How were you able to like find those? Would you just like reach out to like a pop-up show and ask to be like a part of it, or would they reach out to you?
It depends. With the store I'm at right now, Ellister's, that has just been a friend of mine from me going into her shop, and we have mutual friends. So she asked me to put some clothing in her shop because she just wanted to change up the back studio of her space. So in that case, it was a little different. But for the pop-up markets, it's more like they'll advertise to vintage sellers, charge like a one-time fee, and then you can go and put your stuff there as long as, it fits the vibe. Mm-hmm. Sometimes they'll ask for submissions of photos and things. So yeah, I think the majority of the flea markets I've done, I've reached out to them. And also I want the flea markets to fit my vibe, the clientele to match as well. So it's fun to look at the different flea markets around. There's some in Harrisburg. There's been some here in Lancaster. So yeah, I would say it's a mixture of both, like word of mouth and reaching out myself when I see advertisements on Instagram and stuff.
Okay. So, what would you guys say has been like one of the most successful highlights of your journeys?
I think that there's been some great highlights, but I think my favorite one would have to be finding things that I just absolutely saw myself in. I mean, I believe that fashion is one of the ultimate forms of self-expression, and I absolutely loved it. I've loved it since I was a kid. So being able to thrift and find things for a low cost, sustainable, and affordable, I think that it gave me a rush. It was like an adrenaline in a way. And finding things that, whether it be a Banty, whether it be military, whether it be, Japanese denim, it's stuff like that just has such a rich history that I want to add on to. And if, it makes me look good, I feel good. And I think that it's amazing when you are able to find something, sort of diamond in the rough. It's like treasure in a way, and then you treasure it. And so from the things I've found, from the things that I've sold, it all is sort of under this umbrella of appreciation. So
I would say definitely one of my favorite parts about having this business was when I decided to start doing like PR packages to I would find people on TikTok that if I loved their style, I would reach out to them. Sometimes they would answer, sometimes they wouldn't, asking to send them some pieces from my vintage shop. And that was a way that I grew my shop, I would say, a decent amount of it. I reached out to this woman who lived in Austin, Texas. I loved her style. I loved her content. And we exchanged bundles. She had some vintage stuff going on too. So I would say getting to do that and seeing the photos and getting to repost them was just like, it just felt kind of like a dream. It was nice. It was really fun to work with those people. So I'm constantly seeking to do that still. I think it's really awesome to have a piece in your vintage collection and then send it to someone who you look up to, like, and see them wear it and style it. It's it's fascinating.
Where's a spot that thrifting has taken you that you wouldn't have expected it to take you?
I think that, it just sort of brings out your personality, and it brings out you as an individual, and being more comfortable in my skin being able to learn how to communicate with other people, to hear others, to learn how to negotiate. I mean, it was skill building. Thrifting was great, for the clothing aspect, but the long-term lasting effects of it were it was the people, and it was the networking, and it was just the ability to learn about others and just have a, as I've used the term before, appreciation for everything that involved my business and what I did. So
Yeah, that rings true for me as well. I would say, I feel like you summed up how I feel as well. So
Cool. Well, thank you guys for just
Thank
being a
you.
part of this, being able to come on the show, being my second guest on the show. I'll give you guys a quick second to go ahead and shout out your stuff, where people can find you, where they can check out your stuff. I know you already kind of said where your boutique is, but yeah, I'll say stuff one more time. But yeah, go ahead, shout out your shit.
So on Instagram, I'm at LaLunaVNTG. And then I'm at Ellister's Elixirs in downtown Lancaster. It's on Queen Street. I have my clothes in person there. So
currently selling to the bros and the homies only right now. So collection is sort of personal, but if I do get back into it for the right price, it's at the Thrifting Villain. That's THRIFTIN. So
Cool. Thank you guys.
thank you.
Thank you. All right, cool.